I'm so happy today to have Nicole Buscher here. You are the president of, you just told me MICTA? Is
Yep.
that right? Okay,
Yep. Multnomah County Corrections Deputy Association.
nice. Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I've been excited to do this episode for a long time. I've been kind of telling people about it, guests as they come through, because you've just really kind of changed my perspective on corrections and a lot of things. And um, yeah, and I wanted to kind of say to begin with that even before you had changed my perspective on that stuff, corrections in my mind are kind of the most demonized and stigmatized of all law enforcement. Um, I feel like they get a bad rap because there's this whole prison complex idea in people's head, which,
Mhm.
however much you believe that, I just don't think, people deserve that kind of treatment or just idea in their head about what corrections are. Because in any society, we need this stuff,
Yeah.
and especially in modern society. So, but yeah, thanks for coming. And I wanted to start with you just kind of laying out your role and the lay of the land in Multnomah County with our jail system.
Okay. We have two jails in Multnomah County. We have one downtown. It's a maximum. It's the only maximum security jail we have in Oregon. It's the detention center. We share it with Central Precinct, and then we have another jail out in Southeast, and it's Inverness Jail. So that's was kind of designed to be more of a you know, not as restrictive, more open dorm setting. We have some cell housing, but generally, all of our cells downtown are, single celled. And then we have more of an open dorm concept out at Inverness Jail.
Okay. And is that, I wanted to also say too that it drives me crazy that people confuse prison and jail. And
Mm,
obviously here we're talking about jail, which is normally known as like short-term holding,
yeah.
basically, right? Is that correct?
Generally, so you can be sentenced in a jail, but you can't be sentenced more than 364 days.
Okay.
So if you were to get a short sentence, you can serve that time in a county jail. But generally, everybody that we have there, unless they're back on appeal, is not sentenced. They're pretrial, so they're awaiting trial, and that doesn't mean that everybody in our custody is there for less than a year. Because say you have a pretty significant charge, like a sex abuse one or a murder, attempted murder. Sometimes it takes quite a while for all the motion hearings, and your defense attorney is going to set it out for quite a while, just to make sure that they get all the evidence and prepare your case. So sometimes those take a couple years, and some of those folks are in our custody for a few years
I see. Yeah.
to go to trial.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make that distinction because it kind of drives me crazy that they get conflated. And
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that drives you crazy too.
Yeah, it does. It gets interchanged a lot, but the folks in our custody generally are not sentenced, and we don't hold them. We're not designed to hold them for long periods of time. Like prisons have a lot more programs and things like that for long-term incarceration. The county jails were designed to book people in, process large amounts of people, and get them through their court proceedings, and then ship them for wherever they need to go.
Mhm. I was curious too when you said that because I forgot that you said they're the only maximum security in
Hmm.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Is that challenging? Like, do people, because you mentioned before we started, like, do people send inmates there just for that reason of,
Sometimes if you have a very challenging person, there, we have the highest level of security.
Mhm.
So if you have somebody that is like a pretty bad escape risk or has maybe multiple staff assaults, maybe continually gets in fights with other inmates, they can send them to us. Obviously that there's a lot of things that have to be worked out within our
Mhm.
counties and things like that. But we've actually have gotten other, folks from out of county inmates that we've held until they can get through their trial and get sent to wherever. And then the prison system is its own web of prisons. There's
Mhm.
maximum, minimum, and then they can figure out where they want to send them.
Yeah. It's funny 'cause you mentioned that because I was actually looking the other day, like I was mentioning before, I was looking up the First Step Act, which is like a federal prison reform thing. But I was on the federal prison website and you can sort by security level and
Hmm.
location and all that stuff. And it's actually really interesting. But yeah, um, I'm curious too, like, can you explain the booking process? Just kind of lay that up for people because
Sure.
I don't think people know
Yeah.
generally what happens there.
And I always like to explain this to people because, you know, I've really tried to make more of an effort to connect with the community, explain what our job is, because people will see on the news, Portland officers are arresting somebody, there was some horrific crime, something like that impacts our community. And so this person is arrested, and let's say you have like, uh, you know, a, a major event that calls for an ambulance. Once the ambulance goes, picks up that person, they go to a hospital. All the aftercare happens at the hospital. Same thing happens with in law enforcement. So, the police will show up. If they arrest somebody, then they bring them to our jail.
Mhm.
We only book in one area in Multnomah County, and that's our downtown facility. So that's our only place we can book. So they come into we have like a Sally port that's secure. They bring them in through our booking process, and so they'll do like an initial pat down on the street, make sure they don't have any weapons, things like that, and then they'll bring them into our custody, and we do another pat down and search on them, and then we ask them a series of questions, trying to gauge their medical mental health needs,
Mhm.
and if there's something that you know we've actually had people come in and they've been shot and released from the
Mhm.
hospital, and we've had the nurse come up and check, make sure like this person is still okay to be, because we have an infirmary within our jail as well, so making sure that they are stable enough to be in our custody. So if they're okay, we feel like they can go through our process. So they'll move through our process, and they will get fingerprinted. You get your mugshot, and then you'll be assessed by medical. You'll talk to our classification unit. We'll see what your charges are, see what your history is, gang affiliations, if like you're transgender, something that's going to impact how we want to house you, because we're trying to prevent fights or any issues you're going to have in our custody.
Mhm.
So you also will talk. Oftentimes, people will talk to, we call it recognizance. They work for the courts, so they'll do an assessment to see if you're going to be staying in our custody or whether you're going to get released. So there's a whole process that works through our booking process, and then usually that takes a few hours, depending on how many people we're processing. And then if you stay with us, you'll get dressed in, go through a scanner, and then you'll get housed. Because
Okay.
we
Yeah.
also, because after that, like, you know, per law, we have to get people to their arraignments the next day. So you'll go up into one of our units, and then we'll make sure to get you to court the next day.
Mm, okay. Yeah, it's so interesting. I was curious, like, is that pretty standard for cities to have one booking, or is that
Um, like we have a process that we book on average. Our numbers are down because we're kind of coming out of COVID, so our numbers are rising. But we generally book a little over 1,500 people a month. So
okay?
we're
Yeah.
booking between 18 and 20,000 folks a year. So we're kind of a machine. We can process people
Okay. Yeah.
pretty quickly through. Like if you work in like say Lakeview or somewhere like that, you're not anywhere near what Multnomah County is booking through in a shift. So,
Yeah, but I mean, like, is it just having the one downtown location? Is that standard, or is that unique, or is that
well, generally, like, I don't think I think one booking facility within a county, just because it has to be, you have to have the courts there, and you have
it's
to have these different steps in order to process somebody to make sure it's the most efficient. I don't know.
centralized and
Right?
okay?
Yeah, it's
I was
going to
just curious.
be a
Yeah.
lot easier, as I don't know any other county around here that has more than one booking facility
Okay.
in the county.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So let me get into this. Um, kind of funding stuff. And I want to shout out Kristen's episode too. You should listen to her episode with Nicole on Rational in Portland. It's excellent. I got all these questions from listening to that. But I learned in that episode that obviously we have a county budget every year. That's,
Hmm.
everyone kind of knows that. But you were explaining how, funding is a constant challenge. And in my opinion, because of the stuff I mentioned, like jails are demonized and all this thing. Um, but every year your budget continually goes down. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
it's kind of fluctuated. Like in the 90s, we held more people than we do now. So it is the perception of law enforcement and the kind of folks you want to hold has ebbed and flowed. We over the last few years, when I started, so within our corrections, we have 376 funded positions for deputies and then 40 sergeants.
Okay.
Right now, we're about 340 staffed corrections deputies, and we're fully staffed on our sergeants. But when I started, it was at 398, and at one point, I think we were at 450.
Oh wow, okay.
So they've slowly cut our positions, and they've, when they ask for our budget proposals, they want, it to be trimmed down. So they've slowly kind of trimmed different things, different positions in our facilities. And finally, this year, when our sheriff did her budget proposal, she said, I can't trim anymore because like last year, we lost our sex trafficking sergeant. She said we're going to have to shut dorms down.
Mm.
So her proposal, if they wanted the budget cut, would be to shut three of our dorms down, and the proposed budget by the chair, she funded those dorms, so we're not going to lose those dorms. Thankfully, it looks like. But if we did, we would have to matrix out people in our custody and release those folks, or figure out who we could release out of our custody. It would be very challenging, and we'd have to figure that out.
Yeah, I remember you talked to Kristen about that, and I don't think people know generally what that means, but
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's, I don't know. It's a pretty wild concept to me of just basically when you're at capacity, you have to kind of release people.
So we always have to keep kind of a buffer of open beds, but we're running about 85% capacity right now. Once it hits, because before COVID, we used to matrix out pretty regularly. We'd run, get too close to that, like 90, 95%. When we hit like over 90, they start looking and they'll start pulling numbers of who can we let out. Right now, with the kind of folks that we're holding in our county jails, it would be very challenging.
Mhm.
To
These are all pretty high
Yeah,
level crimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
For public safety, it, it would be terrible.
Yeah, wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
And that's known as matrixing.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So let me get into this because, like I said in the beginning, you kind of completely shifted my thinking of using jails as treatment facility because we have this crazy addiction problem along the
Mm-hmm.
whole West Coast, and this intersection of using. I just learned like this morning you have this treatment readiness dorms, or you have at least one. You were saying, um, but it just to me makes so much sense
Yeah.
um, because we have this kind of revolving door with bail reform, which I also want to talk about with you. But yeah, just explain that to people, like how you see that working, and because it just, like I said, it makes so much sense to me, and I don't know why we don't invest more in it.
I think so. I'll start with, like, in places like Multnomah County or Portland and San Francisco, a lot of the more liberal cities. I think law enforcement. I've talked to Aaron Schmaltz,
Mhm,
PPA is president.
mhm,
Um, I think one thing we're trying to do is interact more with the community.
mhm,
We're not your enemy. I grew up in Oregon. I live here. I want to see our livability, our communities safe, and I want to make a positive impact. People that work in law enforcement, we want to make a positive impact on our community, and we want to be part of the solution. Am I saying that we're the end all be all to fix everything in Portland? Absolutely not. But I do think that we can make a significant change, but we have to change our relationship with the public. And I think that was really, even before 2020, I could see it kind of faltering, just the perception of law enforcement and especially corrections. I don't think corrections has ever been held highly in people's mind, but I want to kind of bridge that gap, that I think we can offer the community a lot of solutions. We used to do that a lot more. Um, we used to have something called like the restitution center,
mhm,
where it was a work release center, and people could be there. There was counselors there was housing, there was, you'd get drug tested randomly, and you could go out and work, come back, you'd have a safe, clean environment, and it was very successful. The judges really liked it, the defense attorneys liked it, the DAs liked it, because it was a way to get people to reintegrate into society, and that was supervised by corrections. And those kind of programs, I think, could be very successful in our community and offer a solution. Because if you talk to people that are homeless or go into shelters, oftentimes like the cleanliness is an issue. They don't feel safe,
mhm,
and have a supervised environment where we'll give you the opportunity, but we're also going to have accountability. I think that is something that we can offer, and we can be, instead of just holding people pre-trial, and not that we just do that, because corrections also does, we transport, we have closed street supervision, which is the highest level of out of custody supervision that you have. And we also are, like the courthouse downtown, that is, primarily all the security there is done by corrections.
Hmm.
So, we are in your community, we are part of this. You don't know that we're there necessarily, because oftentimes they think we're just police officers, but we're actually corrections deputies. And I want to kind of bridge this gap with the community, saying, let us be part of the solution for this drug problem that has just overtaken our city in the last few years, especially. And our treatment readiness storm that we have at IJ is pretty successful. Like, the judges like putting folks in there. The folks that are going through the treatment readiness, they seem to really like it. And one thing, like I talked about on Kristen's show, is we have an entire wing of our jail shut down. We have
Hmm.
250 beds that are just sitting vacant. I mean, these have bunks, they have rec yards, they have showers, they have program rooms across from there, and the taxpayers have paid for this, and now it just sits empty.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, I believe what Bybee Lakes is now,
Mhm.
because that for a long time was sitting empty as well, right? And it was
Yeah,
kind of,
and then back then, when we used to have 5 facilities, and Portland was really forward thinking, and they came up with Wapato, and it was going to be more of a treatment readiness, treatment area, that when we held people, it would be a time that we could get people stabilized. Generally, it was drugs back then. Obviously, now we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues and
hmm,
drug issues,
hmm,
oftentimes both. And so, and then all of a sudden we were on this decline, and we've been going down that slope. And I think we're seeing the impact, because one thing I really try to tell people is, and I've tried to really send this message to our commissioners, is the kind of folks that we're holding in custody are very challenging.
hmm,
And it's not just the people right now that are pre-trial. The folks that we're booking in, that have mental health issues, that are homeless, addiction issues. Like, I pulled stats, just for 2024. We've had 13 of our deputies either have urine, spit, or feces thrown on them
hmm.
13 times. And these are, we have celled housing, we have secure food ports in a lot of our areas. We are trained, we get like mental health training, all these different things, like this population. And that's not even counting like our uses of force, and different things like that, that we have to deal with this kind of population that we have on the street. And so I think I was listening to a podcast by Eli Arnold, and he was talking about, they're talking about a stat that like a third of the murders are committed by like homeless
Hmm.
folks.
Hmm.
And so I think this population, while I definitely like want to help them and get them treatment and get them, stabilized on mental health meds, you're going to have to talk about security and safety for your staff that's working there. And that is something that we can provide in a safe, clean environment, and hopefully get people, reintegrated into society. Because I think that's really important. And I've talked to some of the commissioners, and, they're thinking like, oh, if we buy a hotel or things like that. And I said, you better have supervision on this,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's going to be very challenging. So that's like part of the conversation, because we're dealing with these people through our jails, because that's been kind of the hub, especially the last few years of dealing with these folks.
Hmm. Hmm.
And at least bring us to the table so we can maybe give you some ideas, and we can work together to find some solutions for Portland.
Yeah, yeah. Just like I don't know, it just makes so much sense to me because there's like an obvious point where, and people probably makes them uncomfortable to talk about it, but like if they're in the jail, they've obviously committed some kind of crime.
Hmm.
So it just makes so much sense as an intervention point to me of like you said, because with these kind of more violent drugs, I'm guessing like meth and stuff like that, that really make people's behavior kind of wild.
Yeah,
In my head, it's the reason why we have these like debates about should Portland Street Response deal with this. It's from what I've heard from people, it's why we don't have cheers anymore because it's one thing to deal with people on alcohol, but meth and these crazy other drugs is a whole different kind of ball game.
it's
Um,
very challenging.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, that's why like to me it just makes so much more sense to have the jails an intervention point for those people. And email, you also made me think you were telling a story on Kristen's podcast about, I mean, it's not a story, but it's probably a common thing of sometimes you get people who this is their first chance to kind of clean up and like just have a shower and like a meal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And another thing that is different about Multnomah County, even compared to our surrounding counties, is Multnomah County is direct supervision.
okay.
So when we have people in our custody on a walk, we are in there with them. So I am talking with these folks. I'm interacting with them. I've had quite a few folks that I've had in my custody that, once they cleaned up the first, getting through the detox and things like that, they were not bad people,
Hmm.
and they just have drug addiction or they have mental health issues, and they've overdosed and they've died. I think this is really impacting our community, and when we oftentimes, Portland, or especially like during COVID, and even now, they'll bring people in that they're in rough shape,
Hmm.
and when we book them in, we will get them. We have a shower, like a secure shower down there. We have hygiene kits that we give to everybody if they want it when they get booked into housing, or when we're down there. Like, we are not heartless people.
Right.
When you come in, and obviously, like, say you've been urinating and defecating in your pants for days on end, right? So we will go through and like peel those layers off, get you
Right.
fresh clothes, get you a shower, see if you need any sort of medical treatment, if you need to go to the hospital, whatever we can do to make it better. And if you stay in our custody, they'll pull your medical records, see, um, if you need, mental health meds, uh, diabetic medicine, whatever you're going to need, they're going to pull those records and do a health assessment before you even go up into our housing. And once you are housed in our facility, we have what they call a medical request form. So, and it's free. Like, if you have a medical need that's not urgent, like obviously if it's something urgent, let the deputy know, talk to us. We have like emergency call lights in the cell. We will get a nurse down to assess you, because I'm not a medical professional. If it's something like you're telling me you're having a medical emergency, I'm going to get somebody there to take a look at you. But if it's something like you have a weird rash, or you have something that needs, some sort of medical care, we have a process. Like, a nurse will come talk to you within 24 hours, assess your medical needs. We actually have a provider, like a doctor, that comes in. People that have like need dental work, we have a dentist that comes in. Um, we do like blood draws. We've even had like kidney dialysis. We'll bring folks out for that. So we have a whole system in place. Um, and that's one of my big arguments why I think corrections should be a bigger part of this is, like a restitution center or halfway house, that falls under ORS. And then we have, under the jails, we have Oregon jail standards. And then under Oregon jail standards, we have policy and procedures that we have to operate under. And then we have accountability measures of, let's say that, somebody comes in, they're combative, and there's a use of force. It's going to be, there's different layers that it's going to go through, as far as like, did you act professionally? Did you use too much force?
Hmm.
Did this fall within our policy? And if it didn't, if they thought that I was too heavy-handed with the force I used, then I'll get sent to internal affairs,
Hmm.
and then they will look at it, and then there'll be an investigation into that, and then we have base sanctions of like, you use too much force. And then not only that, is now there's a new law that even after, let's say I get a couple days off, they'll send it down to Salem, and then they will review it and see
Okay.
if if I'm, if my agency was trying to protect me or something like that, they're going to review it. So there's these different, this umbrella that corrections falls under. And oftentimes I think that the news kind of glosses over that. Um, do I wish I could say 100% of the time that all of our staff dealing with the population running 24/7 made decisions that were perfect all the time.
Hmm.
We're not going to. We are doing the very best we can to deal with people that oftentimes are very challenging. But when we mess up, there is a way to hold us accountable.
Hmm.
And there's oversight over us. I mean, we have high definition cameras in our jail that evaluate every move I make every day. Every decision I make, somebody can watch it on a video and assess, like, did you make the right decision? And if I didn't, we have a process to evaluate that. So I oftentimes argue with the commissioners is, you know other people that are doing this job dealing with this population, are they under the same kind of guidelines
Right.
and
Right.
umbrella that corrections falls under? Because your police department and your corrections, we are held, to a high standard,
Mhm.
and I think we should be. I fully support this. Um, but I just want to make sure that, when they were talking about dealing with this, do you have that in place to make sure that people are being treated correctly?
Mhm. Yeah, just all the layers and levels of scrutiny, and also, um, yeah, I don't know. It just makes so much more sense because you pointed to the hotel example
Mhm.
before, and I brought it up on the show a couple times of like, I know Denver's the one I always remember, but there's this data of like this huge spike in 911 calls for people with addiction or mental issues, and I totally agree with you. It's because there's no supervision, and
Mhm.
I think when you have a place where, like you said, there's all these levels of scrutiny and just like things to make sure corrections are not doing anything bad. It just seems like a much better place for those kind of folks to kind of
Yeah,
get
and
the
it's
help they need. And
and if you truly want to get better and turn your life around, you want a safe, clean, structured environment. Like
yeah,
corrections is,
I was gonna point that out
yeah.
because downtown is such a challenge. Like the jail to me gives such a barrier of separation from drugs, and
Mhm.
that's just so important.
Yeah, but like I
Um,
mean, they did the National Institute of Corrections came in when we had the overdose deaths. Um, the sheriff asked them to come in and say, "What are we doing wrong here?"
mhm,
And she pointed out multiple times in her report, she's like, "Your facility saves lives. Have we are dealing with a fentanyl epidemic, and we are doing the very best we
mhm,
can, and we have saved a lot of people." But she said, "Your facility gets people in the throes of addiction and you are getting them clean at least for a period of time." And I think we do a darn good job of it.
mhm,
I
mhm.
am really impressed with my coworkers, like, and that's why I do this job. Like, I never thought about, being in the union and do this, but I respect the job that we do. I respect the people I work with. I think they do a phenomenal job,
Mhm.
with a very challenging, part of the population. And they really stepped up, especially during this period in our time, where they've saved a heck of a lot of people. And I don't always know if they realize, why you need like jails, like when the police officer brings somebody in, you know, 95% of somebody's, until the resolution of their case or they go to prison, that's all of us. I mean,
Mhm.
we are very regimented. Like, we serve breakfast at a certain time. You get clothing exchange at a certain time. You get commissary. You get your meds. You go to court. We make sure that all these things happen. Medical appointments. We can process, large amounts of people, and we have a large problem here in Portland. So to me, I think we already have things in place to help deal with this problem. I just want to let the community know that we are part of the solution.
Yeah, like use that stuff because it's
Yeah.
just I keep comparing it. And I'm not trying to throw shade to like the nonprofits and stuff downtown, but I've just heard so much that, and I heard actually from Eli Arnold about how so many of those like shelters and stuff are literally right outside from open air drug markets. So it's just so hard for those people to actually
Hmm.
get help when there's no barrier to separate them from
Yeah.
drug use and stuff right outside. And that's why I'm saying the jail just makes so much more sense because it gives at least some area of protection from that. And like you said, we have all this stuff in there
Yeah,
that
we
can
already, I
help
mean,
people. You're
we have
well equipped to do it.
programs, and we have medical services, we have meds, we have all these things already in place
Hmm.
if you want to expand it. But I think the perception, especially, and I don't fault, I mean, politicians, I mean, you have to go with, what the community wants.
Right,
And
right.
oftentimes the community has not wanted to invest in law enforcement, and, it's political suicide for them. What and I think that's a responsibility of people that work in law enforcement to explain to the community of what we do,
Hmm.
which is why I'm trying to engage more with the community and not just be behind the scenes of telling people the good work that we do every day and why that's so important. Because I do think that we could help a lot more people. Like when we had, like kind of these, areas that they had for, homeless folks to go camp there. Well, what happened, it was pretty soon somebody's running that camp, somebody that you probably don't want running that camp, and they're strong arming folks for, their property, or, honestly committing crimes,
Hmm.
violating people's rights, doing a lot of really shady things. That's not good for anybody. um we are there to ensure a safe, secure environment. That's our number one job, and make sure that things are ran correctly. And we are heavily monitored and scrutinized to do that.
Hmm.
And we're open, we are an open book to the public of like, this is what our policies are. These are the, OJS or ORS. This is what we operate under. And we're just trying to make the very best decisions and do the very best job we can for the taxpayers here in Multnomah County.
Yeah. I think, and I was gonna say, I think you and Aaron both do an excellent, Aaron Schmaltz do an excellent job of that. Like, you know, there's probably previous union people that aren't as just open and like honest as
Yeah.
both of you. So I think both what both of you are doing is really good, and it's like a dialogue that, like you're saying, needs to happen with the community, and it
Yeah.
just seems like you guys are both really open to that, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I don't have anything to hide. I mean, I wish I could say that I've made the right decision every time, but I can tell you I make the best decision I possibly could with what I knew at the time, and that's what we're gauged under. Um, and so, that's what I think all of us do that work in law enforcement. We want to be a positive part of our community and provide a service to protect our community.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking too, does that drive you crazy, like this concept of like, because I've lived in Portland for like 20 years, and it seems like people have this division in their head of like, we don't want to see crime like right now.
Yeah,
That's a really popular idea. Um, but at the same time, you guys get kind of demonized, and it's this kind of
yeah.
two-way battle of like, people don't want to see or hear about problems at the jail, but obviously they want crime to go down, and they don't kind of see how those two things are related. It seems like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I didn't come from a law enforcement family. I didn't know any cops. The only police interaction I had growing up or in my 20s was if I got a speeding ticket or something. And those
Okay.
cops, like, oftentimes, they're not very friendly. So I always try to come from it. I started in corrections in my 30s, and I try to think what I was like before that and try to relate. I grew up in Oregon, lived in Portland since 2006. I try to think, how could I explain it to me as that person?
Mhm.
And so that is part of what our job is to talk to the community and explain that to them. Um, you know, if you get to know me and my coworkers and I can explain to you the job that we do, I think that's the only way I can bridge that gap. And I talked to you off air about this, but we have to change our relationship with each other. Like, and I'm talking about law enforcement with our community.
Mhm.
Right now, and obviously it's retirements too, but young people are not going into law enforcement.
Mhm.
And we have been shunned and almost like ostracized in our communities. And when the 2020 riots were going on, the jail that, when they lit records on fire, that was our jail. And we can't shut the jail down. And I was working in that building the night it happened. And having that impact our staff, not only that night, but months on end of we can't not show up for work. Like we have to go to work and they knew that we had to go to work. So we had to walk through a mob of people or chain link fence, having people call us every kind of racial slur you can imagine. Tell us to kill ourselves, saying they were going to rape our spouses, throw things at us, all this stuff for months on end. Like we cannot allow that. As a civilized society, we had to walk through a mob before we got to the people that were, charged with murder, rape, sex abuse, all these other things, and then when you finish your shift, if you don't get forced over, you have to walk back out and hopefully your car was not damaged or stolen or vandalized.
Mhm.
And you just had to play it cool of like these people are in your face, they're following you, all these things. And you're wondering, like, do I have the same rights as everybody
Right.
else out here?
Yeah. Well,
Because
we live
this,
in such a sensitive society now that that just seems like so unreasonable for any
yeah.
job on the
And
planet.
and we're talking about, racial equity and justice and all these things. And all my coworkers that were non-Caucasian, I mean, they were just getting barraged with like all this horrible hate crime.
Mhm.
And I'm like, you're supposedly here fighting for equality and you're calling this guy the N-word and all this stuff. And it was just really shocking to me.
Mhm.
And you can't have that relationship with us and expect that you're going to get people to come to this profession, especially corrections.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we just need to change our relationship with the public and explain to them that we are people, the job that we
Mhm,
do,
mhm.
and that this should just be unacceptable in our society.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it seems like you and Aaron to me are doing a great job of that. Um, and maybe this is wrong, but I feel like there's just a lot of young people here who still just aren't
Yeah.
going, having that same kind of reaction. Like they're
And
not,
yeah,
it's a two-way street and it takes,
and
and
it's
I'm not
that's
blaming everybody, but like it just like we need to have a
well,
dialogue with
yeah,
people.
and I mean, like what he talked about having, pulling the SROs out of school, and when they were strategic about pulling people out that, really related to kids and had a good relationship with
Hmm.
kids, especially at a young age, that is wrong. And I know that we used to have deputies go into the schools and talk about drug use,
Yeah,
and,
I remember that. Yeah.
we don't do that anymore.
Hmm.
We need to do more community outreach, and I'm hoping that the public is receptive to it because we need to work together to tackle these things.
Hmm.
We are not the enemy that I think we've been made out to be,
Yeah.
and I think that proves in the data. And just like what Aaron has said, when we have unions, I'm not here to protect people that are doing
Hmm.
bad things. I'm here to ensure that the process is fair because the perception and what we've allowed, our law enforcement folks to endure has not always been a fair process. And so I just want to make sure that they have the same rights as anybody else in our society.
Yeah. Um, I'm just curious, like this question popped in my head, but like, do you think, because to me, this is an absolute yes, but do you think there's people in Portland or maybe just anywhere in the West Coast that just think we can exist without jails, like just fine,
Mhm.
like we don't need
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
we've actually,
I
some
don't
of the
understand where that comes from, or
yes.
like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
and it was interesting because I mean, I have a variety of friends, and um, some of the people that, I knew were out protesting and things, and I said, "Oh," and I really make an effort to be open-minded and engage with people and hear their perspective
Hmm.
because I certainly have changed when I look at what I my views in the 20s, compared now to my 40s.
Hmm.
I've definitely changed my perspective. So I try to be open and evolve with the times. So I talked to him and I said, what is your alternative? If it, here we have somebody that is charged with molesting 5 children.
Hmm.
Like this is impacted in this is horrible, right?
Yeah,
What would you like to do with this person? Like this person needs to be separated from society. If we release him, there's he's gonna go back to doing this.
hmm,
What's your alternative?
yeah, it's just, I don't know.
And they were like, well, I hadn't thought that far. And
Yeah, I
I'm
just don't
like,
get. It's like people
yeah,
just omit
yeah,
the whole concept that crime is like a thing. It's like,
yeah.
that's a real thing. You have to do something
And
about it. And yeah.
one thing that I didn't realize before I started this job, I've been doing this over a little over 10 years, is I didn't realize there's a lot of, a fair amount of bad things that happen that don't make the news.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, I look at this and I, especially because I work in the courts, seeing the victims and how this is impacting our community, this is horrible,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think people forget that is we are the barrier, we are the last rung there to separate that person from doing this to people and impacting our
Hmm.
community. So,
You made me think of, yeah, um, the the story you kind of brought up about this widow with like a stolen
mhm.
car, because it just really crystallized. You told it on a Christmas show, but really crystallized this kind of feeling that I think a lot of Portlanders have had for the past 4 years of like crimes that may seem pretty innocuous, but it really impacts people
They
in
do,
their whole
yeah.
life, you know?
And it kind of broke my heart. Like I sit in there and pretty much property crimes, thefts, things like that. They've just been kind of booted down, and
Is that part of bail reform?
yeah, they
Yeah.
spread over, and it just, we essentially only give drug treatment and probation even on Measure 11 crimes now,
Mm-hmm.
and so these lower level crimes that I think really impact our community. Um, I sit in there and I listen to the victims, and they're just shocked, right? And this person had this lady, she was a widow. She had a older truck. She went into Fred Meyer, bought her groceries, came out, her truck is gone. And she's like, I called the police. There's so many car thefts that they don't even send an officer out. I, gave them my information. They eventually found my truck, but it was totally trash and it
Mm-hmm.
was unusable. And she said, this has really impacted me. She's like, I'm on a fixed income. I'm a widow. I don't have the money to go buy a new car. And how is this person getting probation? You know,
Mm,
she's like, and this wasn't his only charge. Um, and I'm sitting in there like, "Yeah, this isn't right. You know,
mhm, mhm.
this has really impacted this woman's life, and these different crimes have impacted a lot of people that, especially on a fixed income, that can't afford to go out and, some of these people that have stolen cars, they burn all the tires off the car, and one family came in, they said, we have to save up every month to buy a new tire to try to replace on our car because you ruined our car.
Mhm.
And this is the only way I can get to work. Like, we shouldn't allow that because, if you're wealthy, or even, upper middle class, you can afford to move out of communities that are crime ridden. You can afford to even move out of Portland.
Right.
If you're on a fixed income and you are poor, you don't have the ability. You have the criminal justice system to help you.
Mhm.
And we are failing people on that count. And I think that is wrong. I think morally, we have an obligation for those members of our community that, um, I think deserve accountability from people that are stealing their things.
Mhm.
That is the role we can play of saying, I understand you have addiction or you have mental health issues or whatever, but that doesn't mean you get a free pass.
Right. You're still creating
Yep.
victims. Yeah.
And oftentimes, like, do I think jail is summer camp? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Do I think it's as bad as most people think it is? I do not. But it is uncomfortable enough that oftentimes it redirects behavior.
Mm,
So
mm.
I think there should be some sort of accountability, and oftentimes I think that should be a jail at least for a period of time, to say no, you don't get to just go steal cars and deal drugs or whatever people are
Right.
doing that just constantly go out our door.
And it doesn't matter because it's just property or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, in my opinion, eroded the livability aspect in this area for the past several years. Because people just they don't have a sense of security or
Yeah.
peace, like just walking out
Or
their
even like
door.
reporting it because,
Right. Yeah. I've
some
heard.
people are like, why would I report my car being stolen? They're not going to do anything, or my
Right.
window's broken out because my insurance is just going to go up, or whatever. You could say crime is down, but I always tell people, drive around Portland.
Hmm.
How does it look? I've gone to Dallas, I've gone to Boise, and I'm looking around their cities
Hmm.
and they're clean and I feel safe. And I don't feel that way in Portland.
Yeah. I definitely don't. And, I was thinking about this yesterday because I was talking about, I used to live downtown for several years, and I didn't have a car. I'd walk everywhere,
Yeah.
and I just don't get that anymore. Like I've been to some shows downtown recently, and it was just kind of striking because afterwards I'd go out and I'm just like, oh, there's like it's like hard to find a bar that's open first of all, and a
Yeah.
lot of places are like boarded up, and if like I eventually found the Virginia Cafe, which has been there forever,
Yeah.
but even that's kind of near where Kristen actually does her show, but um, there's a lot of people doing drugs out there, and it's
Mhm.
just like these weird crowds that just kind of hang out late at night, and it's a totally different vibe from when I was living down there in like I don't know 2009, whenever back when that was.
Yeah,
But
I used to live downtown as well, and I really enjoyed it. And we were a single car family for quite a while, and I like to bike and I would ride the
mhm.
bus and, maneuver around Portland, and I just don't feel
Yeah,
safe.
and
And
the
yeah,
transportation system, I know a lot of
yeah.
people don't feel safe
And
riding
even the
that.
buses, like, as different things happened during COVID, the buses always weren't reliable
Mhm.
and things like that. And so, yeah, it's really unfortunate. And I'm hoping that we've kind of turned the corner and things can get
Yeah, yeah,
back to normal. But I think we all need to come to the table and have these conversations as far as like, how do we do this? And not try to demonize any part of our society,
right.
right? We are here for a purpose, and if you want explanation of what we do or why we do it, I'm an open book about it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't have anything to hide about the service we provide because like my wife, she watches like 60 Days In and like all these
Mhm,
other
mhm,
shows,
mhm.
and um, I I look at those and I'm like, that's nothing like what we do here in Multnomah County. I think we do a pretty darn good job providing services, healthcare, mental health resources. Are we perfect and could we improve and probably expand those things? Absolutely. But as far as what I see on those kind of shows, I said that is not the reality of what I do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I was telling you before, but I Kristen sent me down this path because she said on your episode like go watch Locked Up Abroad to see
Mhm.
this like drastic comparison, and I did, and I kind of knew that like other jail and prison systems in the world were different, but I mean it is a stark difference of
Yeah.
the level of care we have in this country and specifically here. Um, and yeah, you brought up a lot of this stuff. I don't think people know that a lot of those kind of treatments and stuff are there. Like you have dentists and all this
Yeah.
stuff available.
And yeah, and we already have we also have like programs and the fact that you already have all these systems in place, if you were to fund it more and expand it, you I think that would be
It'd be a
cheaper.
yeah robust system
Yeah,
of yeah.
because people say, well, gel beds are expensive. I'm like, you're not just buying a bed and meals. I said, you're also, that's closed street, that's the court system, that's classification system, that's, all inclusive
Mm-hmm.
what that cost is. And I don't know, like even the hospitals around here, I mean, you're going through metal detectors, they have security,
Mm-hmm.
they've had to combine, hospitals to provide security because of the crime and different things that they're seeing in our community. So you're gonna have that element of security. Like I made the argument and I've brought the commissioners, to our open dorms and things like that. And I said, you know, I'm not saying that we're going to, personally corrections is going to provide all this, but I can be the measure to ensure that it's done safely.
Mm-hmm.
And that if there's a problem with somebody in our custody that says, hey, I'm being strong armed, this person's threatening me or whatever, that's where we come in and we say that's not okay. And we're going to ensure that you're in a safe environment to get what you need because we have folks that come through that go to the state hospital and get on meds and things like that, but it takes a while to find that right ratio for mental health. Anybody that knows people that have mental health issues, it takes a while to find the right concoction where you don't feel lethargic, you don't feel terrible, you don't
Mm.
want to self-medicate with straight drugs. Sometimes you need to have that stabilization period. And so I'm not saying like just lock people up that, because that's part of the argument I've had with one of the commissioners is like, well, I can't just go round up a bunch of people and throw them in your jail. You know, that's not my argument at
Right, right,
all.
right.
I'm talking about people that have been booked in our custody 100 times, and we've kicked them back out. But clearly, they're coming back in because they're committing new crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't we have an intervention here and say we're going to provide you treatment like they do at Clackamas County or like Washington County is doing a really good job having treatment. Uh, let's provide some sort of stabilizing service, or even going a step further and having like a restitution center where we can have a work release center and having these people be able to reintegrate into our community healthier and more stabilized so that there's a chance of success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious. What do you think? Why do you think that is that you see these other counties doing that and Multnomah's not doing that?
I think because our relationship with our law enforcement and
It's just so tattered and
it is,
yeah.
and I think that they've really relied on the nonprofits, and I think, I don't so, we when I talk about accountability, and I brought this up to Christians because, when the chair spent $14 million to get 300 people off the street, and they were able to get
Mm-hmm.
36. I wanna know the accountability that they have because
Right,
we
right.
certainly have a lot of accountability. If we're not providing the resource and what the taxpayers want from our end, like if all of a sudden we're not getting people to court, we're not getting their meds, we're not doing the things that we're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
facilitating, lawyer visits or mental health evaluations or all these different things that we are expected and by law have to do. We are held accountable. I said, where's the accountability? Where'd all that money go? And you
Yeah.
have 36
Well,
out of 300.
and you're you're doing it with like essentially a shrinking budget,
Hmm.
and the county has like this mountain of money for homeless services at least that they just don't do a lot
Yeah, and
with. I mean,
and I want to know like how successful are you?
yeah,
Because when we are able to process, people and I'm not saying like get the people that are the working poor on the street. I'm saying the people that are impacting and committing crimes that are really impacting
yeah,
our community.
impacting livability and
Yes,
yeah.
get them services
Mhm.
that you're and they I know that they had funding for like, like the Hooper detox, like something similar.
Mhm.
And I brought up to him, I said, what kind of security are you going to have there? Because I
Yeah,
said, if it's the same kind of folks that are coming through our door, I said, you better have security for your
have
staff
to be
there.
ready. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, then that's structured a lot like your jail. And because it's not like somebody just wanders in, because even, I've gone around and I've toured homeless shelters here in Portland, because I wanted to, my perspective is pretty small. Like I've worked the courts and the jail, and then I walk around Portland, but I'm like, maybe I'm off on this. But even like the mission, they installed like a Sally port door because they had to keep some folks out because they were
Mhm.
assaulting people in there.
Right, right.
And so I said, even they realized that, we had some really good conversations, because they said certain people that I'm sure you're familiar with, which I was, the names they told me, they'll come in and they'll try to beat up some of our, folks that are in here. And we don't have security and we're trying to separate them. And I've got try to get a chair
Mhm,
between us.
mhm.
They shouldn't be put in that situation. These are people that if they're trying to get a hot meal, trying to get resources, they should be able to go. If you're a violent person that's going to assault people, then you're coming to us, because
Right,
you don't
right.
get to do that. So,
And it's just such an important distinction because yeah, I think there's still people that don't believe that like those people exist, and it's just
yeah.
it's a real factor with a lot of these like psychoses and drug induced psychoses that we see every day. I don't know if this is maybe this doesn't line up with or align with what you were saying, but I was just thinking when you were talking about that security stuff. I believe it was Good Sam downtown. Do you remember that security guard that died there like a year ago or sometime around then? But it just made me think of that because I believe it was a homeless person who came in
Hmm.
and killed the security guard, and it just made me think of like, yeah, that security is really necessary to have in this environment because like the stuff we were just talking about.
Well, just, I mean, look at the news where, unprovoked assaults, where people have died,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
just assaults.
it's been a lot this past six
Yeah,
months or whatever.
where
Yeah.
I'm very empathetic and understanding to people that suffer with mental health issues. We see it a lot, and we've kind of been the hub for a lot of these people. I'm not saying it's right, but we have tried to step our game up, to deal with this. Like, we have mental health training for people that work in the mental health units. We have
Mhm.
two mental health deputies. We have a mental health sergeant. We run the mental health courts, making sure that these folks get down there in a safe manner, and bring them to Judge Waller. Like, we have been involved in all these different things, and we see how violent and how unpredictable a lot of these
Mhm.
folks can be. And they need to be treated in a safe manner. And then, like, we have like power washers and things like that in our jail, because hygiene and is a huge issue, especially with people that suffer from mental health issues. So, you know, getting these people out in a safe way to ensure that they're not going to hurt themselves or other people, and then cleaning their cells and doing these different things, it is a process.
Mhm.
And so we have been trained and have the tools to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah, and it just seems like corrections has the most experience
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the whole gamut of all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just, I just point to that a lot because it's like, I kind of use this, it's not really a joke, but I use this like phrase a lot of like, people just point to like, they want like a service to go around and like help people, which sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't just drive around a van and hand like Narcan and like sandwiches and stuff because of the occasional violent person that might, you know,
Yeah.
be there. um, but I point to that of why like street response can't handle everything. Like they just can't. They're not
Yeah.
equipped. Aaron pointed out too. I didn't even think about that. They're not able to transport people, which is like a huge thing. And I didn't realize until you were saying a second ago that you guys do a lot of that too, just for normal court stuff and.
Yeah, and getting these folks to court, and for arraignment court or settlement conferences or pleas or anything like that. I mean, we have methods to deal with that to keep them safe and our staff safe. I
Right,
mean, we
right.
have, you know, leg irons, we have belly chains, we have handcuffs, we have rip restraints, and it's not, like we're hurting them or long term, but it's
Mhm, mhm.
preventative. And I think that's really important,
Keep
because we're used to dealing with those
keeps
kind of
everything
folks.
safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we can, we have like, spit socks, and and people are like, "Oh my gosh, would I love to work in a place that we never had used any of these things?" Yes, but that's not the reality of the population we're dealing
Yeah.
with,
There's a
and
reason that stuff
exists,
came into
right?
play, yeah.
And so we have to ensure that it's a safe environment for everybody, attorneys, judges. So these are the measures we take. And it's not like we do this to everybody.
Right,
The
right.
majority of people in our custody, they go, we take the restraints off, they go to court. But there are the few that we know that there's signs that they're not going to probably do well, and we want to make sure that everybody is safe in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I've had enough people on here to just tell me. It just seems like everyone in the city has had some kind of experience with somebody like that,
Hmm.
and it's not everybody, but I've talked about it in here before. I've had people living outside my house that have had machetes and
Yeah.
people that just shout stuff at me. And it's just, I think a lot of people have become numb to it, but I do think we need somewhere that's equipped to deal with folks like that and get them help if they can get helped.
At least we could stabilize them and have community safety until we could find a long-term solution. I don't, this is a very daunting project, and I am not one to say that, corrections, here we are.
You're
Um,
just one piece of the, yeah,
right.
yeah,
Because, I don't know what to do. Like, I see the severity, especially in the jails right now, of these mental health issues. It's intense.
yeah,
I don't think people realize how bad it is. And
right,
a lot of these folks self-medicate with drugs on the street. And I know that we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but like if you're in Portland, people have talked about, our overdoses and things like that in our jail. If you're downtown Portland, you can get like fentanyl for 80 cents a pill.
right. I didn't know it
And
was that cheap now, but it
it's
just keeps getting cheaper.
saturated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's saturated downtown. I mean, we were booking in people that have like 15 pounds of drugs on them. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy the amount of drugs that are coming into our city. And then, I just talked to somebody the other day in custody, and they said, well, on the coast it's $7 a pill, but Portland is this is how cheap it is. So I'm like, we have taken a very, you know, like we have dealers, we have users, we have people with mental health issues, we have violent people, and we've condensed that population into our jails.
Hmm.
And we are doing everything we can to ensure that the drugs stay out. And we've taken on a lot of different measures to ensure that this is a safe environment. But it is a battle, especially in Portland, because even I think Clackamas or Washington County are not dealing with the saturation that we have downtown Portland.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really is because what drives me crazy is I've had people even on the show be like, fentanyl wasn't created in Oregon and it's not, it's everywhere. And I always point out it's like it is a hub for fentanyl. Measure 110 also
Hmm.
helped in my mind accelerate that. And we have this Ninth Circuit problem, which is going through the Supreme Court right now. But it's just like at a trifecta to really make that an explosive kind of fentanyl hub. But yeah, I was curious about the county stuff. I wanted to ask you, like, do you see optimism post-election in this May election for like, do you? Because you said a second ago, like you see things, you hope things will turn around and
Yeah.
things are kind of going that way. I kind of feel that way too. But do you think that this election will increase that and keep things going in the right
I hope
direction?
so. It was interesting. One of our old chairs, Kafori, I think, and even to a certain extent, like our old sheriff, they thought if you cut jail beds, you cut crime. And obviously, I don't think that's working out well. And so that's obviously just plain wrong. But I'm hoping, it sounds like some people that are running, even on the city commissioners or county commissioners, have common sense and they realize that this is a very complex problem.
Hmm.
And they're willing to listen. I've met with a lot of the folks running for county commissioner, and I've just tried to explain to them what we're up against, offer some solutions, because I've talked to a lot of the judges since I work in the court system. I said, wouldn't it be nice for you guys, because they're really frustrated as well, saying like,
Mm.
where do I send these people? Like
Right, right.
like they just keep coming through. And I said, wouldn't it be nice if corrections could offer you an alternative that was giving some sort of solution, like treatment or work release or something that was somewhere you could send them? And they said yes. So um but we have to have the commissioners and we have to have the community on board to do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So I'm pretty hopeful. I think we have some good candidates. They seem like, if you run a business, if you've ever had to do anything like that, like with your show, right? Talking to me is probably the easiest part of your day. Everything that you had to do to prepare to do this today. And so I hope that they take that same perspective with what do I have in place that is working that I could expand on, what's not working. And like, I talked to Jesse and I watched her on your show. She
Hmm.
seems pretty like she's runs a business, right? And she seems pretty sharp.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully she can tackle some of these big issues if she gets elected, or Vadim, he seems, like he's dealt with a lot of these things. He's pretty open. I've listened to some of his stuff. Um, so I think they have real life experience. I think that they're part of our community, and I hope that they can make some change.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm actually talking to Vadim tomorrow, so I'll ask him about that. I'm curious, yeah, if he's dealt with that as a judge in his,
I'm
yeah,
sure he
yeah,
has, and I think, I also think, like, when you have children and you want to make it better for them, I all these things kind of worked around me as a child, and I want to ensure that my kids have that same kind of experience. And I want to make a positive change for everybody, not only, for my family, but in our community, but also the people that are suffering on the street. I mean, to sleep on a sidewalk and be cold and experience that every night, especially like if you're female, and like Oregon's like number one for percent for sex offenders, like if you're a
yeah.
female on the street, like
It's
it's
not
not
good.
safe.
Yeah, it's not good.
And so, we need to make Portland safe again. So I'm hopeful, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay. I was curious too. What do you? I know this like September uh change to 110 is going to kick in September. I'm
Hmm.
curious, like, what do you think about that? Do you think
So
it'll
I've
be?
brought this up to the judges. I brought this up to the commissioners. I said, if we're around 85% and
Mm,
you want to start holding people accountable for Measure 110, where would you like to put them? Because
I didn't even think. Yeah, that's a good one.
um, I said, your county jails, because, I don't know if people kind of follow what's going on with the jails. Obviously, I do. But like Washington County, they're having a heck of a time with their staffing. They're having to shut down booking. They've had to shut down some dorms. You know, we're the 24/7 operation here in Multnomah County. And if you want to start holding people accountable, if you are seeing that, hey, like this is, cartels or whatever,
Hmm.
you're going to start trying to really hammer it down. You better get us some beds because we're going to fill up pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually didn't even think about that, but yeah, because I don't know. All I know is it kicks in September, and that's when the new changes
Mhm.
kick in. But what does that mean? Can you kind of explain that to people? Like,
Just that, it can be a misdemeanor offense. And obviously, like, you've heard, like, with the DAs, Schmidt and Vasquez, whoever gets elected. And obviously, even Portland, like, I have to say, like, I didn't know anything about Portland police,
right.
but I've interacted with a lot of their detectives, a lot of their officers, especially in the courts. Like, they try to find alternatives
Hmm.
to incarceration. Like, if there is somewhere else they can bring them or something, they're not looking to just book people into jail by any means.
Yeah. It's one of the most, I would say, progressive systems in the
Mhm.
country, it seems like. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
For criminal
but
justice. Yeah.
But if all these other measures are failing and they're consistently, committing crimes and things like that, and they want us to hold them, or if they put them on some sort of supervision, and then they want like parole officers to start, issuing detainers again, and things like that, we're the people that hold those folks.
Hmm.
So hopefully they kind of have some, this over the summer, however these elections go, that they say, okay, we're this is the plan. This is, they talk to Portland police, and it's like, do you think this is going to be an issue? What are you seeing on the streets? How are we going to make sure these folks are held accountable? If we're going to go the jail system or another alternative, how are we going to do this? So hopefully, all of our leaders here in Portland are figuring this out.
Yeah. I'm prepared for it and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking just a second ago, are you, are you a fan of Bob Day? Like his,
Um, yeah, I mean,
I
like
don't know much about him, is why.
we've been really trying to like stay out of endorsing folks, because it seems like it just never goes well. Like you're, isolating different members or different candidates,
Mhm.
depending on who gets elected. But yeah, I mean, I don't know a ton about him. You don't know much about him either?
No,
Yeah.
no, I don't know. I don't know. I always try to pay attention to whoever the current chief is, and that's all I know is he's there now.
Yeah, I've talked to some of like their, like lieutenants and captains and things like that, and because
I've heard good things though. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really I think what and I'm really happy like Aaron's reaching out so much to the community and things like that, because I do think that they run a pretty darn good organization.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think so too. All right, I just have a couple more questions here. I wanted you to get your reaction on the PSU stuff this week. this episode will probably come out after, after this, but maybe it'll still be going on. Who knows? But also from the perspective of booking, like you mentioned earlier, 180 days of protests, booking protesters in that context, is it just a revolving door with
Yep.
it?
Yeah, they're
What's going
just
on?
misdemeanor crimes. So we actually arraigned all those folks yesterday.
Oh wow.
And yeah, there was like 30 some folks that were issued misdemeanor. But yeah, they book through, then they usually get kicked back out, and then they go to arraignment court the next day.
Okay, that's like
So
a what? How long is that process? It's a couple hours to do that.
usually, depending on how many people were booking, it could be like 2 to 4 hours, and then
Okay.
you're back out the door. Unless you're held for whatever reason, like maybe if you're on supervision or your PO puts a detainer or you
Mm.
have another hold out of another county. But yeah, those folks got, sent back out. And I think it we're all kind of watching that as far as people that were here when the riots happened, because we really don't want to go through
We
that
don't want the
again.
round two. Yeah.
No, like I don't think it really like how much this impacts your law enforcement community.
Mhm.
Imagine if you work at Nike or anywhere around here, and you got to walk through a mob of people yelling insults at you and threatening you every day. Like that would wear on you.
Yeah.
And you get to work at Nike. Like that seems pretty cool. Now work at a jail, you
Right.
know. Um, so I really like I see the impact that it's had. Like, I just remember those days where because law enforcement I think has been really progressive trying to diversify our officers, deputies, sergeants. There's been a huge push in law enforcement to diversify who we are, because our community's diverse. And so a lot of these folks that I work with come from like Cuba, Bosnia, Russia, Denmark, Mexico, and they come in and like they'd have eggs on them, and they would be these protesters were like throwing eggs on them and throwing
Mm.
all these insults and calling them all these racial slurs. I'm looking at this and I'm like, and they're like, this is crazy. Like I fled countries because of this. And
Right.
what is going on here in America? Like I shouldn't be treated this way. So I'm hoping that obviously there's a lot of trauma and PTSD from our law enforcement folks, and we're watching this because we do not want to endure this again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that if Portland wants to have law enforcement, um, you cannot allow people to be treated this
Yeah.
way, because we're part of your community, and yeah.
Yeah, it's and I see it as like a twofold thing of like, yeah, you're totally right. It's completely demoralizing for police and corrections, anyone involved with that. But it's also like, and I get the sense that the public is just done with it too, just after
Yeah.
this week, because our downtown is trying to recover. We don't need this to be going on for weeks and weeks again. Like
Yeah.
that's not going to help the downtown core at all.
Well, and
And I'm not,
there's
and I'm
yeah.
also saying like if you want to protest, do that. But when you get into criminality,
Mhm.
that's what we don't need is more of that and burning 15 police cars and all that stuff. And
Yeah, because this costs money. And I mean, like I look at those businesses, and a lot of those businesses, because obviously I work downtown and I go in and, buy lunch. And I mean, just to have, these small business owners having their windows broken
mhm,
in, and, you know, it's not right.
yeah,
We should not be allowing this. And just the fact that we've allowed people just to spray paint on our public buildings.
it's pretty normalized,
Yeah,
and
and if
that's
you
yeah,
yeah, you look at the federal courthouse, I mean, it looks like Fort Knox there.
hmm
And I'm like, man, like they're prepared. And like that's not how we should be running our cities,
yeah. It
you know?
definitely keeps people away from downtown too. And that's
Yeah.
not what we're trying to do.
No, and you
Um,
want businesses to have a safe, clean environment to thrive. And
yeah.
yeah, I'm really yeah, we're waiting.
Hoping
Yeah.
hoping there's not a big round two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just make sure there's nothing. Oh, I did want to ask about because the Narcan stuff you were telling me a second ago is really interesting. I just think it's really interesting that you have this like huge array and like bank of inventory of Narcan
Oh yeah.
there. I'm just fascinated with Narcan and what it is and how it works, and it's kind of a just the whole concept of it's interesting to me because you're kind of ping-ponging people back and then they'll go back to drugs a lot of the time. And but yeah, I'm just curious about your like you were telling me about the inventory and the amount of it you have and just
Yeah, so as people leave our jail, there's like a, big box of it. Like people can grab a box of Narcan. We have, and it's actually inventoried in our checklist. For every dorm that we work, we have Narcan in there. We have Narcan in the hall. We personally carry Narcan, a lot of us. We have Narcan everywhere. I mean, I've personally Narcan for people,
Wow.
and it happens fast.
You guys are all trained on that, or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we go through training on it. And a lot of us have Narcan people, and it's not just in the jails. Like, we've had people drug up to outside of our courthouse, in the bathrooms, and you really need to catch people pretty quick.
Yeah,
I've seen people like drop because they found drugs somewhere and run over, and then they're turning blue with they kind of go gray, and then they seize up. Almost, it looks like a seizure at first, and yeah, and a lot of times, we've had people's hearts stopped and, had to give them CPR. So it's,
are you pretty used to that now? Like, 'cause you say you've done it 4
yeah.
times, like, that's
hmm
pretty.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we've gotten really good at it.
Yeah,
We have like safety shields. We've are really good at giving compressions, and we could hook up to the O2 from we have crash cards. Like, it's
that is
crazy.
wild, yeah.
It's the fact that this is what we're dealing with. But I tell people, because they're like, "Oh, what's going on with your jail?" And I said, 3 people in Oregon die a day from overdoses.
Mhm.
3 people a day,
Yeah,
and we are in Portland.
I wanna say we're still, I think it was the CDC did that report, and we're the leader in overdoses for
Oh,
last year, I think it was, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's crazy, and, like, we had 8 people, like, I think it was last year, year before last, 8 people die in a weekend of
Wow,
overdoses,
wow.
and on the street. And so we've condensed our population of people that are drug addicts and things like that, and we are checking on them. I mean, we go through so many processes. I mean, we are randomly going through all of our dorms and just anything we can to keep the drugs out.
Yeah,
And so we've gotten really good at it, but it is just a huge problem in our society in general, and we are just a small slice of our community. So we're dealing with the same stuff that they're dealing on the street. And honestly, I think we're even more successful than the street, because I look at how many people have died that were in our custody that went out and overdosed. So I don't know, like, we're probably preventing a lot,
yeah,
because I mean, I can think of 5 inmates that I had in my cells, working in, because you get modded into the jail, or I just work in the jail still, and I'm like, what happened to that person? They're like, oh, they died, they overdosed,
mhm.
and that's unfortunate that we're just allowing that as a community.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to really, you know, deal with this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I could talk so much about addiction, and people still, I think there's people that still don't think it's an addiction problem, but just fentanyl is a game changer, and
Mhm.
it changed the
Yeah, and
game
I
for,
I would definitely like just warn anybody that has like children, because this fentanyl stuff is just in everything.
yeah, yeah.
It's
You read about that too occasionally,
yeah.
infants getting overdoses, and it's just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it just impacts it on every level. I mean, I can't imagine, see these police officers show up and people have, OD, and there's children and the home environments. I mean, it just on so many levels is
Hmm.
impacting us, and
Yeah.
we need to deal with this issue.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Um, okay, let me kind of get to my ending questions here. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about that, but I was gonna,
One thing
yeah.
I wanted to touch on was, so our only maximum security jail we have is downtown.
Okay.
It was built in the early 80s.
Oh, right, right. Yeah.
Um, this jail, there's not a time that the jail shuts down. It doesn't matter, snow, ice, protests, whatever. We are open 24/7.
Which is kind of unheard of for any facility
It's
of
yeah, it's
any
crazy.
kind. Yeah.
Imagine your house never having like just constant, right? And so we've had basic maintenance, but it's starting to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And the electrical systems, the sewage, the everything about this, and we have to have some sort of forward thinking in our city and in our county. IJ, it's not designed for the kinds of folks that Inverness Jail is
Hmm.
not designed. It's not a max security, which is the kinds of folks that we're holding in Multnomah County now. Um, even we're kind of pressing the limits on what we're holding out there right now. And we have to have some sort of plan. I've expressed this over and over. I know it's not fun. It doesn't sound exciting to talk about, jails and making sure that you have a working facility. But, the fact that we're having, periodically, our booking gets flooded with raw sewage and water because the pipes are failing. We have to deal with this issue that we either need to fix our facility and fund that, or build a new facility.
Yeah. Because at some point it eventually becomes just like a basic rights thing. 'Cause I thought I remember you saying, wasn't there a time, maybe it was during the ice storm when like there's no heat for like several days or something in there?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. The heating. So like it was mostly in the basement floor, but it would go up to the fourth floor, and so we had to give people like extra blankets, or we had to shut down booking.
Hmm.
This is really impacting. So if these things happen and we have like even a major catastrophe, and you
Right.
shut down booking, you have one place to book, and oftentimes that's the only place to book for the neighboring counties as well. So I just want to put that on people's radar that we're going to have to deal with this issue, and I'm hoping that we don't wind up with a major catastrophe before we actually deal with it, because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's one of those things too. I hope people think about it at the county leadership level because I could see one of those things of like they just start pointing the finger at you or like
Hmm.
the sheriff or somebody, but it's like, you know, I'm
Yeah.
sure that you guys have known about this for a long time and have been
Oh yeah,
talking about
but I
it.
mean, you're talking like millions of dollars to
It's
repair
very
this building
expensive.
if you
Yeah.
stay in it, or because Central Precinct, we share a building with Central Precinct,
I was going to
so
mention that. Yeah, you guys
yeah.
also share this with the police bureaus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we need to figure out, whether we're going, because obviously everybody's got to work together here, the city and the county, and figure out whether you want to fix this one or you want to build a new one. Where do you want that to be? But there has to be some sort of planning to go into
Yeah.
this.
Otherwise, it's going to just
It's
keep
gonna
getting
fail.
worse.
It's gonna
And
be an epic failure, and then what do you do with all these folks?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Um, Tell me as much as you want about your Northwest story. You kind of mentioned some of it earlier, but just like you grew up here or did you move here or whatever?
I grew up in Central Oregon, and then when I graduated high school, I grew up in like Lapine, Prineville area, and then I went to U of O, or went to Lane, did track for Lane, and then went to U of O, and then graduated there, and decided that I wanted to move to Portland. 2006. Was a wildland firefighter for 18 seasons before I did this.
Wow.
And so I was gone a lot. You're gone for, 4 or 6 months a year.
Is that 18 years?
18 seasons.
See,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, generally, start May, June, depending on how long the fire season goes,
Okay.
September, October. So I was gone, and I worked, in Oregon. I went to school, and then when I think 2006, I went down to Nevada because my family has a firefighting business. And so I worked on the east side of Nevada for a number of years, and then decided I want to have kids and kind of have a stable job. So my sister told me about this job, and I thought she was crazy. I was like, there's like no way that I want to work in corrections. Like I had all these ideas. I had no idea why I had all these ideas and perceptions of corrections. But then, one of the deputies here in Multnomah County reached out to me, took me on I got to shadow him for about a half a shift, and I said, this isn't too bad. Like, I like the people here. The deputies seem really cool. I talked to quite a few of them, and so I decided that I would apply. Back then, I mean, there was hundreds of people that were applying for these jobs,
Mm.
and it took about 6 months. But then I was hired, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But I'm still here, and I still really enjoy my job, and I really honestly, like, the best part of this job are the people I work with. They're good people, and I think I've learned a lot from different cultures, and a lot of my coworkers that I would have never had that same experience working in fire or anywhere else. So I feel really lucky that I fell into this job, and I really enjoy it actually.
And that was how long, when did you start doing that?
I'll be 11 years in October. I'll have
Okay. It
worked here.
was over a
So
decade. Yeah. It's a long
yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, it's changed a lot, but we're still getting like a lot of the younger people coming in, and I think I've been really impressed with like just the diversity, especially like living in Portland.
Hmm.
The diversity that we have as amongst our correction staff. A lot of folks are like first generation Americans, and their stories, and a lot of them just like love America because they came from places that were very unstable and war torn and things like that. So, or socialist countries, and they think this is like the greatest
Right. They
thing.
don't
So
necessarily have the same rights as we do.
yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. I mean, like one of one of my sergeants, like he's a super cool guy. He's from Cuba, And he's like, imagine growing up and being told what you're going to do, what you're going to eat, what
Yeah. Yeah.
he's like, do you know how much freedom I have here?
Hmm.
So it's been, and we have people like from Bosnia and Russia and Mexico, and listen to their stories and different religions and different cultures. I've learned a lot, and yeah, I feel pretty lucky.
That's cool. Yeah, you did kind of mention this, but it is kind of weird because it like if I had just talked to you not knowing what you do, you don't seem like you'd be in
Yeah,
corrections. But
yeah.
I think that's a good thing, like
Yeah, and
just
that's
like
the
a
thing is,
normal
like, I
human
think,
being.
like, most of us, we don't, like, when you go to work, like, we like, especially in corrections, like, we have to be a different personality because we have to de-escalate and talk to people.
Hmm.
That is what our job is to how to figure out how to work with large amounts of people that oftentimes are difficult behaviorally, mental health issues, and we have to figure out how to navigate that. So we do a pretty darn good job, and I think you can't do this job and not care about people,
Hmm.
because you're seeing people at the lowest part of their life. I mean, even if they don't suffer from any sort of mental health issue or addiction issue, like if you get, charged with a crime and you're all of a sudden you're booked into jail, I mean, you've hit the lowest part probably of
Hmm.
your life. And how do you deal with that? And how do we assess that? And how do we get you the help you need? So, the people that you talk to that are corrections, like we're pretty personable people because we have to talk to people. We can't just not, we're not in like some isolated bubble
Right.
that we're just monitoring people. Like we are actively in these modules with folks and dealing with them all the time. And oftentimes they're difficult. So,
Yeah.
you have to navigate that as well.
Yeah. Um, One thing I was gonna ask you before this is kind of along with my goofy questions, but um, I can edit this out if you don't want to answer
Mm.
this. But I was gonna say, what's like, is there like and you want to use the word ideal? Is there a movie, a jail movie that's like they nailed it of like what it's actually like,
I have yet to see one. And I think also it's different if you work in a jail or a prison.
right? Because there's a lot of prison
And
movies. I feel like that.
yeah, there's a lot of prison movies, but I can't think of any that truly shows because honestly, a lot of what we do is not fun. It's not media worthy.
Right. Right.
And I think that's why a lot of people are not, we're not racing down the street catching the bad guy. We are, we're doing clothing and linen. Like we're very structured, on time kind of folks that is your walk time, and that's why I think some people kind of thrive in there because
Yeah.
it's like, I'm going to tell you what you need to do and make sure that you do it. So,
That makes sense though. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so routine that it's not exciting enough for like
Yeah, it's
Hollywood.
no, it's
Yeah.
not exciting at all. And if you actually do your job well,
Hmm.
that's like nobody's writing articles about us in the weekly or anywhere else that, man, these corrections deputies, they work 24/7, they're getting modded all the time, and they are keeping this place running,
Yeah,
right? Like nobody writes that
I can
story,
definitely
right? But
attest to.
anytime one of our members supposedly either they think that there's something there or they can find some statistic, my goodness, like they're gonna blow that out,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
that's media worthy. But I can say, like, if you think about 20, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night, we are running that jail
Hmm.
constantly.
Hmm.
um and we're pretty uneventful,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I just thought I'd ask. All right. Let's say you are parking somewhere, normal parking spot like a shopping complex or something. Do you
Yeah,
pull in or do you back in?
I generally back in.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm getting a lot more of those answers these days, but I
yeah.
do that too. I've been doing it more too, so.
Yeah, I think especially as like a female, because every parking garage is like, oh my gosh, I want to like a quick exit,
Hmm.
and I can
Hmm.
see my car. I can, it's not tucked in there. I can kind of see as I'm walking up. You have the big window,
Yeah.
so I feel a little bit better about that. And I always try to park where like there's a pillar, so
Okay.
I can make sure that there's nobody in the next car, or
Right.
van or
Some kind of
anything.
protective
Yeah.
visual. I was just wondering, is that you guys share? Is that really cramped in that garage? You have like an underground garage down there at the downtown jail?
So that's only generally for our command staff. So we have to
Okay.
pay to park,
Oh my, are
or
you
you can ride the
serious?
bus. Yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
kind of stinks. Yeah. And I've tried to like with the union to try to find secure parking for us, trying to deal with the city because they were in the parking. I went through so many levels of supervisors and emails, and it's been very
That
challenging.
is, I would never have guessed that, but
Oh
I've had to
man.
do when I worked downtown for like 10 years and I had to do that sometimes at Coin. I had to do that. And my hack for that, which maybe not a hack, was I would park in like Lad's Addition and just
Hmm.
walk
Yeah.
across the bridge
Yeah.
because it's free to park, but that would end up taking like half an hour to walk or 20 minutes
Yeah,
to,
especially when it's rainy or cold.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's rough. Like parking is definitely challenging, which you wouldn't think with everything shut down right now. But
yeah,
I thought this was the time I could strike to find parking.
yeah.
But to try to find whoever that person is, to get us secure parking. Oh
That's, yeah, I would not
nightmare.
have guessed that. Okay. Um, which piece of fruit do you think you could throw the farthest if you were in a football field and just chuck that thing?
I would think like a lime.
Lime, okay.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
density's good. It's small.
I get
Um,
lemons and limes confused, but I think I'm thinking of
the
the
little
right one.
green ones.
The green one, okay,
Yeah.
not the yellow one.
Well, it doesn't have the right, the limes are like
It
a
has like
nice
the
ball. So
tapered
like,
end.
yeah,
Yeah.
the lemons are,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think it would fly as well. How about you?
I always say banana, but I don't think people agree with that. I don't know. I just feel like one day I'll try it. One day I'll try the banana and just throw it. And,
Yeah, maybe if it was like really like curved or something, like you could
yeah.
get, yeah, boomerang.
I just feel like it'll just power itself and just keep going.
You should do that. You should line everybody up like 20
I
people
know.
one
Yeah.
day and you can pick your fruit.
Keep telling people I'll do it. I'll take a video or something and try it out. Yeah, when it comes to peanut butter, do you like crunchy, smooth peanut butter, or maybe you don't like peanut butter?
No, I love peanut butter. We eat a lot of peanut butter because I have kids. I like crunchy, but the kids like smooth, sweet, smooth.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
What about stir no stir?
No, God, and the stirs. I tried like, I was vegetarian for a while. That fell off. Then I tried to be, like organic and like eat really
Right.
healthy. And so everybody was supposed to eat that, oil,
It's like
like the stir kind.
$13 peanut butter or
It's
something.
awful. Like, you get oil everywhere, that you can't stir it. It's like mixing cement. Yeah, I don't know. And then
Okay.
like there's like the pre-stirred one, but then that just tastes horrible.
Mm, mm.
So yeah,
Okay.
I just go with the sugar.
I'm pretty much on the same. I like crunchy no stir. That's kind of my
Yeah,
jam. But
it's solid.
you have a favorite type of French fry? Do you like regular cut, crinkle cut, curly fries,
So my wife is like bi-coastal. She lived in Maine. Her dad lives in Maine, and so she introduced me to pier fries with
pier
like
fries?
pier fry. You
I've
get them
never
on the
heard of
pier,
that.
like they're just you like they're the crinkle fries, but you put like a bunch of vinegar and salt
Oh,
on them.
okay.
And I was like, "What are you doing to the fries?" And she's like, "You got to try these," and they're now my all-time favorite
That
fries.
sounds really. Is it almost like what you get with fish and chips? Just the
Yeah.
potato part of
It's
that?
just that, you're down there like on the pier and it's I think the environment and it's just your whole carton soaked in grease and
Yeah.
it's I'm sure it's a heart attack in a bucket. So yeah, they're
I'm gonna have
delicious.
to Google that. Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
I like that. Pure fries. Um, let's say you're getting ice cream somewhere. Do you go waffle cone, regular cone, cup?
Usually depending usually waffle cone.
Okay.
Yeah.
The tastiest option,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
And what about what flavor are you putting in that cone?
Just usually like a basic. So I know like salt and straw or whatever, I usually get like the snickerdoodle.
Okay.
But if you go like different places have like I don't know if you've ever eaten at Handel's ice
Oh,
cream.
no.
One of my coworkers told me about it. He's like, the best ice cream I've ever had. And I'm like, really?
Where's it? Do you know
Is
where
in
that is?
Sherwood.
Okay.
And so I was like, and I don't know if I want to go to, all the way down, but we went and they have like a coffee Heath ice
Ooh, that'd be
cream.
good. Yeah.
It's so good. It's by far the best ice cream I've ever had.
I don't even really like Heath bars, but that combination sounds good.
It's
Yeah.
delicious. Like coffee ice cream with a Heath bar. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's a little
it's
texture crunch to it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Do you keep your butter out or do you keep it in the fridge or maybe both? People do.
We keep it out. Unfortunately, like we have a cat and he likes to eat the butter, so we've had to like secure the butter. He's broken so many butter dishes, especially when he's pissed. So, but we still keep it out. But yeah,
Nice and soft.
yeah. I don't know.
That is weird. I've never heard of a cat eating butter, but I
Oh
guess
yeah, he'll eat like a whole like cube of
just
it.
get it in there.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is because I've heard of kids eating butter, which is also
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cat is like loves butter.
And how's the cat's weight? Is he
Average size.
okay? The
Yeah,
butter's not okay.
yeah.
All right.
I
All
mean,
right.
we've gotten better about him not eating the stick of butter, but yeah.
Okay.
You keep your butter out?
You know what? I actually since I've started asking this question, I didn't even really have it. I did bring it up with Leslie Beenan, who was on here, and I'm like, I have some of my fridge that's expired, and she's like, that's fine. Nothing's like butter doesn't
Yeah.
go bad. Like all that
You
stuff.
should get margarine. That stuff will last for like,
Yeah,
nuclear war.
it's just
So,
yeah. But yeah, I have some that's in the fridge that's probably expired, but
yeah.
I guess not expired. Um, this is a new one I added yesterday. Do you like string cheese? Do you eat string cheese?
Hmm.
Do you peel it or do you just eat that thing?
Peel it. That's,
Okay.
yeah, that's the benefit of the string cheese.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm like the only one that just eats it. I've started this whole like
Really?
battle, and people are like, "Yeah, it's in the name. That's why you string
Yeah.
it." And I'm just like, I just like to eat it as fast as
Well,
possible.
that's why you
But
get like if you're just you get the squares if you don't want to peel it. But I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
if yeah, I
Somebody
guess they don't
brought that
really
up a couple
have.
days ago. The little like Tillamook squares. Or,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, like cheese is delicious.
Okay. If you were forced to pick a brand to run, like Nike or something, was there one you'd want to run? I don't know.
So, yeah, I think my cousin, so I went up and visited my cousin. He's a guide in Alaska and every time I think like my life is hard, I think about being a guide in Alaska and those guys are just really badass and tough. And so he tests out a lot of the Kuyu brand and
Okay. What is that, like hiking gear or something?
it's like exterior clothing, but it like they just put it through the ringer like
Okay.
bags and rain gear and stuff like that. And I think it would be kind of fun to like have the most extreme elements for a brand and see what these guys could put it through.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
So I think I would probably like to do something like that.
Okay.
Find like badass people and hear their stories and see what
Yeah. I like it.
push it.
Um, did you have a good meal recently or a business you want to shout out? Doesn't have to be a restaurant if you.
Um, No, unfortunately, like I have kids and I've like really limited how much we go out to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't think they really enjoy good food. They'll like go out and order grilled cheese and it's like $20. So I'm like, that sucks. So no, I'm pretty boring.
What about like, is there like a Portland staple, like something you've always been like, oh, like if it's like a special occasion, that's like a place you
Yeah,
have to
but I
go.
feel like if you live in Portland, like you're supposed to be like really up to date and like trendy because like there's all this good food and amazing. But like I'm, I always like bamboo sushi. Like that's like I always thought that was the best sushi. I
It was
always felt like
good.
it was like
Yeah.
fresh and delicious. But then like now it's really popular, so now it's not cool to
It
say
is.
bamboo
Yeah.
sushi. I used to like to go to, of course, like the Ten Shed or something like that, but um, they, again, they're kind of popular.
Yeah.
So now you're not cool if you mention those things. So there's no like up and coming one or one that's like kind of hidden away that I can name.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking of this isn't my favorite, but I always enjoyed going to Huber's. Have you know Huber's?
No.
It's downtown, but it's what's cool about Huber's is it's like 365 days a year. You can get like a Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, really?
Turkey's like their thing, but you should go in there sometime. They have a beautiful stained glass like overhead window, and I
Nice.
believe Huber's has been there for I don't know decades. It's been there for a long time, um, but yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up here?
Um, One thing, so I think this is important for the community to know, and I meant to somehow work it into my spiel, but so one of our deputies out at Inverness goes around and talks to a lot of folks that are going to get out of custody, and has actually given like a lot of job training for like flagging, food service, even gotten people GEDs and these different kind of programs, and then when they get out, she's connected with like Southeast Works and like a temporary labor place and then she's like, when you get out, just go there and tell them like, this deputy has sent you, this deputy sent you, and then they will know. Like, because there are like, I think there's a misconception that if you have a felony that you can't get a job. And
Mm-hmm,
there's
hmm.
actually, she has like a whole book, like pages of places that will hire you if you have a felony. And so I was like, wow, this is like super cool. I was like, this is awesome. And so I, gave her a list of questions to ask these folks. And I said, we've had let's say 300 people go through. I said, of those 300 people, how many are successful? Because it seems like, you got them job training. They just, you can go
Mm.
here, you can, you got this kind of safety net. And she's like, well, I only usually know if they're successful if like the people like call me and they'll, I'll check in on them. She's like, it's less than 20. And I said, what are you talking about? I was like, this seems perfect. There's the job, whatever. They're clean by the time they leave and whatever. She said, when they come back in, sometimes they'll commit new crimes, they come back in.
Mm.
And I said, why? She's like, because a lot of people are like, I really want to work. I want to be successful. I have kids. I have whatever. And she said, the drugs are just too strong a pull and
Mhm.
they'll leave our facility. So I said, I gave a list of questions of, what would make you successful when you would leave, So I'm just trying to interact with people in our custody more to find out where we could do better. And they said, housing is a huge issue. And that's why, like, I think I'm pushing more like the restitution or work entry center, because clearly we have to have something that you go from a very structured, regimented, clean area to here's Portland. And I don't
Mm.
think that that's going to set people up for success.
Mm.
At least it's not working what we're doing. And granted, this is a very small thing that we're doing. We're not doing it on a massive scale. But I think that's kind of an important thing to remember when we're trying to create things in Portland, that we have to have something that's going to be that in
Mm.
between,
Mhm.
just jail and turning people loose, so that we can hopefully set them up to success, and let them get stabilized, let them make a new community of people that are hopefully clean and sober, find the resources they need to be successful, before just saying, like, here's your stuff, good luck.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just hugely important in this world of addiction, or this, area of addiction we're in Portland, and a lot of other areas in the West Coast. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but yeah, Nicole, thanks so much. This was a great conversation, and
yeah, thank you
yeah,
for having
have
me.
to have you back sometime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll make some positive change, we'll come back.